There are millions of people who only feel truly safe when the sun goes down. Not because they're avoiding something external, but because darkness is the only place their nervous system finally stops screaming. You might be one of them, the person who exhales when midnight arrives, who finds peace in empty streets and silence when the world sleeps. But here's what nobody talks about. This isn't just a preference, it's a psychological adaptation, and it reveals something profound about how your brain learned to survive. Most people will tell you you're broken, antisocial, depressed, avoidant. They'll medicalize your comfort zone and pathologize your peace. But what if I told you that feeling safer at night is actually a highly logical response to invisible wounds most people never even acknowledge? While everyone else feels protected by daylight and crowds, you've discovered something they haven't, that vulnerability and visibility are not the same as safety. Let's start with the surface explanation, the one that sounds reasonable but barely scratches the surface. Most psychologists will tell you that preferring nighttime is about introversion or circadian rhythm misalignment, that you're just a night owl, a chronotype outlier. And sure, there's some truth there, but that explanation is lazy. Because when we actually interview people who feel safer at night, a pattern emerges. It's not about biology, it's about surveillance. During the day, you are constantly being perceived, evaluated, judged. The world is watching, and your nervous system knows it. Every interaction is a performance. Every public space is a stage. You're being scanned by coworkers measuring your productivity, strangers assessing your appearance, authority figures monitoring your compliance, and social algorithms tracking your engagement. Your brain is running threat detection protocols all day long, not for physical danger, but for social punishment. And here's the key. You learned this was dangerous. Somewhere in your past, being seen meant being harmed. Maybe not physically. Maybe it was a parent who scrutinized everything you did, a school environment that meant difference meant targeting, a social group that punished authenticity, or a workplace that weaponized visibility. So your brain made a calculation. Visibility equals vulnerability. And at night, the watchers go to sleep. Nighttime doesn't just reduce visibility, it creates an absence of architecture, a world structured by what's not there. No demands, no expectations, no performances required, no eye contact, no small talk, no manufactured enthusiasm. This isn't depression, this is nervous system regulation through environmental design. You're not avoiding life, you're avoiding the performance of life, and your body knows the difference. There's something else happening too. At night, the social contract changes. During the day, if you're alone, people ask, "Why aren't you working? Why aren't you socializing? What's wrong with you?" But at night, solitude is expected. It's normal. The same behavior that would be questioned at 2 p.m. is completely acceptable at 2 a.m. Darkness gives you permission to exist without justification. And for someone whose entire life has required constant explanation and defense of their internal experience, that permission is intoxicating. Think about the last time you stayed up late, completely alone, doing something you loved. Maybe you were reading, creating, thinking, or just sitting in silence. There was no one to impress, no one to explain yourself to, no one measuring whether you were being productive enough, social enough, normal enough. That feeling? That's not laziness. That's your nervous system finally dropping into a parasympathetic state because the environmental threats have disappeared. The world tells you this is unhealthy, that you should be asleep, that you're wasting your life. But your body is telling you something different. This is the only time I feel safe enough to actually be myself. And here's what most people don't understand. That's not a bug in your system. That's a feature. Your nervous system is functioning exactly as it should, protecting you from an environment that has proven itself to be hostile to your authentic existence. So when people ask you why you're a night person, they're asking the wrong question. The question isn't why you prefer nighttime. The question is, what happened during the day that made nighttime the only safe option? And that question takes us somewhere much deeper. So we've established the mechanics. You feel safer at night because nighttime reduces social surveillance, eliminates performance demands, and grants permission for authentic existence. But this raises a deeper question. Why do you specifically need this when millions of others seem perfectly fine being visible during the day? What happened that made your nervous system conclude that being perceived is dangerous? This is where we go deeper. Because feeling safer at night isn't random. It's not just a personality quirk. It's a response to something specific that happened in your relational history. And understanding that is the key to everything. The truth is, feeling safer at night is usually a relational trauma response, but not the kind people typically recognize. When most people think of trauma, they think of dramatic events, abuse, assault, catastrophe. But there's another kind of trauma that's far more common and less acknowledged. The trauma of being misunderstood while completely dependent on people who misunderstand you. Let me explain. As a child, you needed two things to develop a healthy sense of safety: attunement, adults who accurately perceived your internal state, and acceptance, adults who validated that internal state as legitimate. If you had caregivers who consistently misread you, who projected their own fears, needs, or expectations onto you, something devastating happened. You learned that being seen clearly was impossible. Not because you were defective, but because the people responsible for seeing you were looking at a projection, not at you. Maybe your parents saw you as more fragile than you were, so they controlled everything you did. Or they saw you as more capable than you were, so they ignored your needs. Or they saw you as an extension of themselves, so your separate identity was threatening. Whatever the specific pattern, the result was the same. Being visible meant being misinterpreted. So you developed a coping mechanism, performing a version of yourself that others could understand. You became the easy child to avoid overwhelming your parents, the high achiever to earn conditional approval, the caretaker to maintain relational stability, the invisible one to avoid becoming a target. And here's the devastating part. This performance worked. It kept you safe. It maintained attachment. It prevented abandonment. But it also created a split. The you that people see and the you that actually exists. Maintaining this performance requires enormous energy. You're constantly monitoring others' reactions to calibrate your behavior, suppressing authentic responses that might trigger negative judgment, manufacturing enthusiasm for things that bore or drain you, and pretending not to notice things everyone pretends not to notice. This is called social hypervigilance, and it's absolutely exhausting. By the end of the day, you're not just tired, you're depleted at a nervous system level. And nighttime becomes the only space where you can stop performing and still be safe, because there's no one there to perform for. The mask can come off, the monitoring can stop, the constant calibration can finally end, and your system can discharge all the tension it's been holding all day just to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Here's where it gets really interesting. Many people who feel safer at night actually crave deep connection. They're not antisocial, they're hyper-selective on relational safety. They've learned that most social connections operate at a surface level that requires the exact performance that exhausts them, so they avoid it. Not because they don't want connection, but because shallow connection is more painful than isolation. Think about it. When someone asks, "How are you?" and they clearly want you to say good, that's not a connection, that's a performance demand disguised as care. When someone invites you out and you have to pretend to enjoy something you hate just to maintain the relationship, that's not friendship, that's relational labor. When you have to hide your actual thoughts, feelings, and needs to keep people comfortable, that's not intimacy, that's self-erasure. And nighttime becomes the space where you can connect with yourself, with creative work, with ideas, with online communities where masks are optional, without the constant demand to perform normalcy. You're not broken for wanting this. You're honest. You're refusing to settle for the kind of connection that requires you to disappear. There's often another layer here too: high sensitivity. If you're someone who notices subtleties others miss, feels emotions intensely, processes information deeply, and gets overwhelmed by stimulation, then daytime is an assault. The overload of the sensory and emotional noise, the aggressive brightness, the constant demands. Your nervous system isn't broken, it's highly calibrated, and nighttime provides the low stimulation environment your system needs to function optimally. This isn't a weakness, it's neurological honesty. While everyone else is numbing themselves to get through the day, you're actually feeling everything, and that takes enormous strength. But it also requires enormous recovery, and nighttime is where that recovery happens. In the quiet, in the dark, in the absence of demands. Your system is doing exactly what it needs to do to maintain itself in an environment that was never designed for someone like you. So now we understand the deeper architecture. You feel safer at night because daytime requires a performance that fractures your sense of self.